Okay, let's get started then. Welcome to Grow with Purpose in 2021. If any of you have missed the previous sessions, just some very quick logistics before I introduce Mark. Absolutely, please ask questions. You can type them in the chat box. As we go, if there are clarification questions, I will ask them of Mark as we go. If it's a bigger question, then I'll wait toward the end of the session to ask. Aside from that, if you can keep on mute, that helps to minimize distractions, but keeping your video on is welcome because then we can actually see the people who we're speaking to and see your faces and your reactions. So love to do that. This session should finish at 1:45, and then we'll have a little bit of a break before starting the next session at 2 o'clock. So I will go ahead now and welcome Mark Daniels. He is the Executive Director of Market Operations at Social Traders. He has worked in the social enterprise field since 2001, and over that time he's procured from social enterprise, run social enterprises, lobbied for social enterprise, and helped found Social Traders, which is now Australia's leading social enterprise development organization. These days, Mark specifically focuses on working with government and businesses and the buyers within those to buy more from social enterprises in their supply chains, including 90 businesses and government buyer members that are working with over 380 certified social enterprises within the Social Traders marketplace. So very exciting. Welcome, Mark.
Thanks, Sarah.
Great.
How are you going?
Yeah, good. Things are going as well as you can expect today. So
Good, well done.
Can you start us off by talking a bit about what is a social enterprise and why are they so important?
Yeah, sure. So social enterprises, sorry, got my phone going here, are businesses that exist to benefit the community. So, and we actually we certify social enterprises and we certify them against three criteria. One, that they exist for community benefit. So they are not there specifically for personal profit, but community benefit's the reason they were created. They trade, and trade is the majority of their income. So we don't just fund any good cause. You have to be a trading entity that sells into marketplaces. And then lastly, that you reinvest the majority of your profit into the mission for which you're established. So they're mainly altruistic businesses. So when we think about a social enterprise, it could be a nursery that employs people with disabilities. It could be a for-profit. It could be a not-for-profit. It could be a company limited by a guarantee. It could be a company limited by shares. It doesn't matter what company form they take. It just matters that they've got those three core characteristics, which is they're a socially driven business and they trade in doing that. And so some of the ones that people would know are, the better known social enterprises are things like Thank You, for example. So if you've ever had Thank You water, which doesn't actually exist anymore, they've stopped doing the water, but they've got nappies and they've got hand soap. And then if you have heard of Who Gives a Crap, they make toilet paper, and that toilet paper, the profits of that are used to help sanitation projects in developing countries. If you've bought from an op shop, you're buying from a social enterprise. So op shops reinvest their profits back into addressing social issues, whether that's supporting another not-for-profit or directly creating opportunities for disadvantaged cohorts. And we've got social enterprises in really broad and diverse areas. We've got them working in pretty much every industry. There are thousands of social enterprises. In fact, there was a piece of research that identified there's probably 20,000 social enterprises in Australia, and it's over 3% of the economy. And so this is quite a broad definition, but it's not unrealistic and includes all businesses that exhibit those characteristics that I define. In our world, we mainly work with B2B, which means social enterprises that sell to business or government. And we think there's about 1,000 to 1,500 of those in Australia.
Yeah, fantastic. That's amazing that up to 3% of the economy is actually social enterprises. And I guess a lot of them don't feel the need to come get certified or things like that. They're just out there doing what they believe is the right thing to do.
Look, they don't even refer to themselves as social enterprises, and quite often don't know that they're social enterprises. So this is, this is not the self-identified community. This is the community that meets the definition, probably in that there's, 25% of the community would identify as a social enterprise in some way, and the rest are broader. I mean, what I didn't really touch on are the sorts of beneficiaries. They're really diverse. I mean, the Australian of the Year is a really good example this year. She is really interested in, bringing women's health issues into the public domain. She was involved in I think the Young Australian Year runs a hygiene products for women, where all the profits go to raising awareness around periods and the issues that relate to those. We've got social enterprises that create employment or address issues in every disadvantaged community you can imagine, from women at risk of domestic violence through to people exiting the justice system, to asylum seekers and refugees, to long-term unemployed, to people in regional and rural areas, to homeless people experiencing homelessness. We've got social enterprises that have a really strong environmental bent. So they might be really focused on reducing waste going to tip sites, for example, or they might some of the carbon offsets are owned by social enterprises as well. So there are a whole range of different motivations. Pretty much every social or environmental motivation you can think of, there will be a social enterprise that's somehow linked to it. And probably the biggest group is around job creation for disadvantaged couples.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, it is clearly such a broad church, almost like it's just a catch-all for any business who is trying to accomplish something other than profit to an extent.
Yeah.
But why do you think that there is such a proliferation of them? I guess, like, what is the gap in the market? A lot of people view some of those issues that you just touched on as things that the government perhaps should be addressing.
Yeah.
So why is there that gap?
Look, I think what social enterprise allows people to do is see a problem and fix it, right? So when you say government should be doing this, well, government gets told they should be doing everything at the end of the day. So every social issue is something that government should be intervening in. And I think what social entrepreneurs are particularly good at is saying, well, it would be good if government addressed this issue, but we also have to find ways to address this issue. So I'll give you a really interesting example. In Yakandanda in Victoria, and it's in the mountain areas, so it's in the Alpine region of Victoria. It's a little town, and their petrol station went broke. And so a sign went up and said this petrol station is closing. And that was the only petrol station in that town. And the nearest town with petrol is Albury-Wodonga. And it's about a third of a tank to drive from Yakandanda and back to Albury-Wodonga. And so that community was faced with a situation where they could lose their petrol station, which would probably lead to them losing a whole range of other businesses, because people would now have to go to Albury-Wodonga very frequently in order to get petrol. And in doing that, they would buy other things while they were there, and they'd stop buying from their local shops in that region. And that would lead to a domino effect and potentially the decline of that town in a significant way. And so what the town actually did was say, well, maybe we can run this business in a different way, where we can make it viable by having a stronger commitment and making it owned by the community, and any profits that the business makes, or the majority of the profits that the business make, will go back to the advancement of the Yakandanda community. And so they had a local businessman who basically took on the view. He was a consultant for one of the big four firms, and he ran a community share float, and he did all the business modelling And he found that if they did, I'm trying to remember the exact number. It was like 18,000 litres of petrol a week. They could actually make the business work. And if the community owned it, they'd be much more likely to buy petrol in their local town. They would be less likely to buy it in any other location as well. And so they ran a community share float. They needed, I think, 250,000. They actually raised over 400,000. So there were like 300 or 900 people in that community who took a stake in that business because they actually knew that that business was one of those keystones in a community. If you take the keystone out, everything else starts to fall apart. And it was interesting. After about 2 years, they were making a profit. They were investing their profits back into community advancement. In fact, their biggest challenge was that every entity that was failing, including the local newspaper, said, "Can you buy us?" Because that would allow us to continue to operate in this town. And they've been running since 2001, I think, and successfully retaining people in that town, using a model that neatly meets the definition of social enterprise, because they didn't do it to make money. They did it to keep a service in that community, to keep young people in that community, to keep the businesses alive in that community. They use trade to do it, and they reinvest the majority of their profits back into their mission. So that's where most of the money made by what is called the Yakandanda Community Development Company, which is the name of the petrol station, goes to. So that's the sort of innovation that I think we're talking about here. It's not government, you should be doing something about this. Well, government can't intervene when every small business goes under. Sometimes you need innovation, and the government can't create jobs for every disadvantaged person. So sometimes you need innovation, and sometimes you don't need government money. You can actually find ways that work that might need some support in the early stages, but then you've got a viable business that doesn't need that ongoing funding that we're seeing from government. And maybe government's role is in different domains. So a lot of my work is around procurement and enabling big buyers and small buyers to engage social enterprises in their supply chain. When you've got enabling policies, suddenly these businesses are able to grow and become and scale, so their impact becomes much, much bigger. So I think there's a role for government in solving many problems. There's a role for government in enabling others to solve problems as well.
Yeah, very good point. Yeah, and I think that the government is looking at large scale programs and policy settings, and individuals can have those spot issues, focus on this is an individual problem that's happening just in this location, which is really not a government concern, as you say, one business going under. So yeah, that's really useful. And also I love that this is just an example of individuals seeing something wrong that they want to fix and figuring out a way to do that.
Yeah, absolutely. And actually engaging with their entrepreneurial spirit too, and not sort of saying, well, there's a problem, government should solve this. They're kind of going, there's a problem, but I think I can solve this, I think I can be part of the solution.
Yeah. Now, you've been working with social enterprises for around 20 years, I believe. And obviously the sector has grown significantly during that time. But can you tell me about the demand that you've seen? So not just the growth in the number of social enterprises, but more around the demand from consumers and businesses and governments wanting to purchase from them.
Yeah. Look, I think what we're seeing is this. There's a general expectation now that businesses and business and products are responsible, and so we've seen the growth in ethical, and we're seeing the growth in green, and we're seeing the growth in social as well. So social enterprise products are getting pretty good engagement, and that's really a reflection of a broad growing in social consciousness. So the more that people, I don't need to tell you about it. I think everyone on this call will understand the sort of change that I'm talking about. I think what is also happening is that there are, when we're working with corporates and businesses, I think quite often it's about their value proposition to their customers. So they're basically looking for ways to market and more effective ways to market. And they think, and I believe rightly so, that their customers value these things. So that if they can demonstrate that they're delivering a lasting social impact as a result of that spend, that customers are more likely to engage with it. And you know, I mean, I just look at, I'll use the example of Who Gives a Crap, you know, a toilet paper company. Now, I actually remember talking to Simon Griffiths, who's the founder of Who Gives a Crap, one of the founders anyway. I was like, you've got to be kidding. You're going to start a toilet paper company. You know, like who would ever think of starting a toilet paper company? Called Who Gives a Crap, which is a beautiful name for a business that seeks to achieve social outcomes and sells toilet paper. But who would have thought you'd ever find market? I mean, Sorbent and all these companies have been doing it forever. How are you going to find a foothold in the marketplace? And they just worked it out. You know, they went to the socially conscious organisations. They got their stuff into groovy cafes and pubs and those sorts of things. And they took toilet paper in a different way. And they said, if you actually believe in what we're doing, then come and buy from us, and don't just go to the supermarket and buy your toilet paper there, you know. And I think they distributed $5 or $10 million in profits back to their social cause last financial year. And they only started 3 or 4 years ago. This is not a company that's been around for a long time. And that's 50% of their profits. So they commit that 50% of their profits will go back into the mission for which they're established. So I guess what I'm really saying is, there is no way in God's earth a standard toilet paper company with no assets and no financial backing behind it could have risen to a point where it's generating $10 to $20 million in profits in 3 or 4 years without that X factor. And that X factor is the social consciousness that sits behind it. That's what engages people. You know, I buy 48 rolls every quarter because that's the way they sell it. So I do not want to find a place for 48 toilet rolls in my house every quarter. It's the biggest, I was going to say pain in the ass, but it's the biggest annoyance to find storage in my house to put this toilet paper. But I do it because I believe in the cause. And I just think, God, if I'm going to spend that money anyway, and it's pretty much the same cost, why wouldn't I? You know? So that's a really obvious one for me. I think, you know, so community expectation is stronger, customer expectation is stronger. We're also seeing government, and government is really leading on this now. So they're actually saying, we want a more efficient way of buying. So traditionally, we try and get the cheapest product or service. They would call it best value quite often, but often it's the cheapest product or service. And you know, if we can get cheap things, we're saving money for government, and you know, those savings can go into community programs ultimately. And I think what we're seeing now is, well, actually, we do want to get a good price, but what else can we get out of our buying? Can we get other social outcomes? Because we're a double bottom line organisation or a triple bottom line organisation. We're here to create employment and address environmental issues and those sorts of things. But our procurement doesn't actually lend itself to achieving those objectives. So can we change the way we buy so that that can occur? So we're seeing that happening, and we're seeing a more supportive environment in general for social enterprise now, where there are policy frameworks in states, where there's funding in some instances that's targeted to social enterprises. So I think government likes the idea that they can enable social entrepreneurs to do their thing, because it's probably going to end up being a hell of a lot cheaper than any government solution could be for addressing the same issue. And I guess the other bit is, once they're running and flying, social enterprises never need anyone else. They will run themselves. They're commercial businesses. And all they need is the ability to start. And once they're running and operating and achieve sustainability, they don't actually need government beyond that. And that's pretty attractive to government. I think we're seeing another group of people emerging in this space. So my son's 18. When he was at school in year 10, they did a unit on social entrepreneurship. And I thought to myself, wow, that's really interesting, because in 8 years' time, everyone under 25 is going to know what a social enterprise is. And for some people, they're going to see it as a bit of a direction that they want to go in, because they, the values are sort of getting, I guess there's been a binary view of the world before. You go into business or you do good things. You can do one or the other. You can't go into business and do good things. And so what we're seeing a new breed, I guess, of people who are either growing up believing in this, but we're also seeing another group of people who have been in the private sector and developed incredible expertise. They're engineers, or they're HR consultants, or they've done whatever it is, and now they want to set up a social enterprise. So we're starting to see them responding to the emergence of opportunities in the marketplace. And I guess, what our work around procurement, and I guess I should just explain what we do. We run a marketplace, so we work with companies and governments to build social enterprises into their supply chain. So we have about 100. Our numbers have gone up, Sarah. So we've got 110 commercial and government customers, and they're companies like Lend-Lease and Westpac, but they're also universities, and they're also small companies, so tier 2, tier 3 suppliers who make who lay tar on roads, or they might be small consulting practices. It's quite diverse, and so we actually sell a service to those companies where they engage us to build their capability and to access our data to build social enterprise for them, so that they can start engaging social enterprises through the way they buy. And so, that could be getting cleaning in, it could be getting PPE if you're in, an outdoor construction type field. It could be site sheds, waste management, marketing and comms. It could be film. It could be food. It could be, services like, some social services, EAP services, just really super diverse. And we've done a lot of modeling in our marketplace. So we've been running this marketplace for 3 years, and in that time, about 220 million has been spent by our buyers with our social enterprises, and that's created almost 2,000 jobs for disadvantaged Australians and a whole range of other direct impacts in disadvantaged communities. And we think this market is going to grow. We've done some modelling, and by 2030, we're predicting it to be our marketplace alone, and stuff happens outside our marketplace, but about 1.5 billion in being spent between buyers and social enterprises. So 1.5 billion per year, which will be absolutely huge. So, that's because governments enabled this to occur. And it's because corporates have basically said, well, we want to head down this track as well. But the government message always helps corporate Australia. And then there are smaller businesses who just say, we should be doing this as well. And why wouldn't anyone buy from a social enterprise, all things being equal, if you could get that added impact?
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. And obviously the Victorian government has their social procurement framework. I'm sure other states have similar things in terms of their own state policies.
Yep.
So how are government and corporate buyers actually implementing that in practice? Like, how do they implement that into their procurement approach, both at that government level and the corporates that you deal with?
Yeah, look, it's pretty diverse. I mean, quite often it's, the first thing we do with a lot of companies is we do an opportunity analysis. So that's just saying, what do you buy? And where could a social enterprise supply you? So, if there's always really low hanging fruit. And, I've mentioned food and toilet paper and water and those sorts of things. There are some easy things. And then, everyone needs a whole range of other business services. Some of the ones I mentioned before, I won't repeat them all. And so sometimes it's actually just about the introduction. So sometimes we run networking events where we bring social enterprises and our buyer members together. And it's actually incredible when you have a chat, and first of all, they go, most of our buyers are quite suspicious of buying from social enterprises. So they'll join and they'll go, yeah, this is a great idea. We really love it. Or you know, but in the end, I've got these people who I've used for the last 5 years. You want me to change who I'm buying from and buy from an organisation that isn't even a normal commercial business? I'm not really that comfortable with this. And I guess what we try to do is say, you know, we can say, no, they're really commercial till the cows come home. But it's only when they meet them and they have that conversation, they actually realise they are commercial and that they can deliver social impact at the same time. And so that is probably the most powerful way of doing it, is to bring people who buy together with social enterprises. And then if you're really getting into procurement, it's about changing the way people buy through their documentation. So if you're doing a request for tender, which is how, you know, most companies actually go out to market, particularly companies that turn over, you know, 10 million plus, they actually have documentation, and it's the same documentation pretty much for every tender. It just sort of has a different schedule or scope. And when they start to write social enterprise into that document and talk about how much they value it, or weightings that they would attach to it, and they're the tools that you generally use in a tender process. So you put a weight or a mandatory target or something along those lines. Then we actually see them buying from social enterprises. So suddenly they're tilting the playing field to advantage or benefit social enterprises, and social enterprises respond incredibly well to those opportunities. So, I mean, what we're really fundamentally doing is change management. When we work with an organisation, we are trying to change the way they think about how they buy. And that's usually as much about getting them excited as it is about changing processes. And the one thing that you can do is I can talk about our beneficiaries in social enterprises, and everyone will identify with one of them. So, you know, does anyone know someone who hasn't had a mental health issue? Does anyone know someone who's not a refugee at some point, in their life? Does anyone know someone that didn't have, you know, that hadn't experienced hardship and long-term unemployment at some stage in their lives? And it'll be different for everyone, but everyone will identify with one of our beneficiaries. And that's the key trigger. When you can identify with it, you can say, why aren't I doing anything about this? Because I care about this issue and I can do something about it. How? You know, I just need to now know how to do that. And we support them to actually do that within the organisation they're in as well. So, and then what we do at the end of the year is we actually report back on how they spent their money and what impact it created. And that's pretty powerful too, when you can say, well, you spent, you know, $1,000 or $100,000 with this organisation, and that created 2 jobs for disadvantaged people as a result of that process. So we can tell that whole story about where your money went, who you spent it with, and what impact it delivered.
Amazing. Now I've got one more big question that I'm going to ask Mark. So everyone who is watching, if you have any questions, make sure to pop those in the chat so that I can get those to him just after that. Thank you, Tanya. Clearly been hanging on to that one. But first, Mark, what do you see as the opportunities for existing small businesses to adopt some of the strategies that you've been talking from social enterprises to improve their own social impacts without having to become a full-fledged social enterprise?
Yeah, that's right. Well, you can become a social enterprise. I would just say that from the outset, and that for most people, that's a bridge too far, and I completely understand why. You know, because you may not be doing it for the same reasons as a social enterprise wants to do it. But, you know, there are ways that you can do it through the way that you, I mean, anyone can buy from a social enterprise. So I've given me as a personal consumer buying who gives a crap. I get my coffee from a social enterprise. I buy my wine from a social enterprise. You know, my health insurance provider is a social enterprise. My credit union bank is a social enterprise. So I have personal buying power that delivers impact. So any business, it doesn't matter if you turn over 100,000 or 100 million, you can actually engage social enterprise in your supply chain. There's no barrier to that. And one of the things we're doing is we actually have a paywall on our list of social enterprises. So if you want to find social enterprises, you have to be one of our members. But what we're doing in April is we're removing the paywall. So if you're interested in buying from a social enterprise, please remember to come back to Social Traders in late April, and you'll be able to find over 450 social enterprises across Australia that you could buy from, and you can find them by category as well. If you're a bit more desperate to buy sooner, you can become one of our members. We've got low rates for organisations. That was designed for smaller businesses, about $2,500 a year. I think people can actually directly address disadvantage through their recruitment. So recruitment's a really obvious area that if you've got staff, are you thinking about who you're bringing on and what background they're from, and whether you can have a direct impact on people who are experiencing disadvantage and who are well qualified for the job. We've got an amazing social enterprise called Refugee Talent, who works with refugees to get them into employment. And it's incredible. They actually bring people out from refugee camps in the Middle East directly into jobs in Australia. They've got special permits from the federal government that enable them to do that. And, you know, they have a lot of engineers, for example, who are better qualified than most of the engineers in Australia looking for these entry-level jobs. And so they're getting someone way beyond what they can normally achieve. You know, but they're not, you know, they haven't, they just haven't worked in Australia before. So there's an incredible opportunity there. Obviously purchasing from them. And, you know, I think it's about whether you know, there are some great examples all over the place, companies like IGA and many others who actually have a position where they actually donate a percentage of their profit back to the community. So I think thinking laterally about what you do yourself is a really interesting idea as well. And there was a question around B Corp. So, I mean, I think you being the sort of company that you would like to buy from is always an interesting idea. You don't necessarily have to be a social enterprise, but having the qualities, some of the qualities that you aspire to in your own company would be really good. I might just pick that question up while I'm talking to it, Sarah, which is, what's the difference between our certification and B Corp certification? It's pretty different. A social enterprise can be a B Corp and would nearly always meet the B Corp criteria. Anyone who doesn't know what I'm talking about, it's B Corp is a movement for, B is short for benefit, so it's benefit corporations, so businesses that do good through their operation, and there's a point scale that you have to get pass in order to be seen as a, and it might be the way that you treat your staff and the policies that you have and the wage disparity between the owner of the company and the lowest paid person. It's sort of looking at what would best practice look like and whether you've got strong environmental, you probably know more than me on this stuff anyway, Sarah, but in social enterprise certification, what we're really certifying against is just three things. Do you exist to address a social or environmental or economic issue? And is community benefit at your heart in doing that? So yeah, I've created this business to benefit the community. We trade, and trade's the majority of our income, and we will reinvest the majority of our profits into the mission for which we're established. They are the only things that we certify against. So we don't certify against environmental policies, wage disparities within the organisation. We do ask people if they're paying award wages and so forth, but we are looking for social enterprises, not good businesses, which I think is an important distinction. And when I say that, not businesses, they are good businesses, they're doing amazing things, but we're not using the same criteria as B Corp uses.
Yeah. And we will have tomorrow afternoon someone talking from B Corp as well. So if anyone wants to learn more about that one, that is. So next question then from Danielle. How do you see the growth of social enterprise impacting or interplaying with the not-for-profit sector?
Yeah, good question. I think the not-for-profit sector is pretty engrossed in social enterprise already. 50% of the income in the not-for-profit sector is earned income. It's not from government and it's not from philanthropy. So I think I've seen stats that say Australia has the third most entrepreneurial not-for-profit sector in the world. And if you think about op shops alone, there are more op shops than McDonald's stores in Australia, and they, they're linked to pretty much every major not-for-profit in Australia. So I think what you find is that most not-for-profits actually have, maybe not most, but a lot of not-for-profits have a social enterprise arm. They might not call it a social enterprise. So it might be their RTO, they're running a registered training organisation, or they might have op shops, or they might have services that they're selling into the they might run their own EAP program as well as providing counselling and support. So what it really is about providing a more diverse income stream, and most not-for-profits that we engage with would come to us because they want greater diversity in their revenue stream. So they're not just happy to be dependent on government. And if the funding doesn't come through, we're going to lose 50% of our business. They are really keen to have a much more holistic set of revenues in the organisation. And I guess the other part is, a lot of ours are not-for-profits who started a social enterprise because they saw a social issue that they couldn't address, and nor could government or philanthropy address. So this was the best. I worked at the Brotherhood of St Lawrence a long time ago. I've been at Social Traders for almost 13 years now, but I worked at the Brotherhood of St Lawrence for 4 years before that, and it's a Melbourne-based charity. And I remember running social enterprises there, and someone said to me, "But what if I could give you $100,000 in grant?" And I said, "I'd much prefer a $100,000 contract than a $100,000 grant, thanks." And it's just a mindset shift that we're chasing money all the time, but actually, quite often, contracts are a much more sustainable and impactful way of delivering the outputs that you're seeking to.
Mm. Yeah, that's so true. I mean, we've seen that so much in the Indigenous sector, especially with the Indigenous procurement policy at the federal level, how much that has created a business community in the Indigenous sector, not just receiving funds. So it's that empowerment at the same time, I guess.
No, I agree, and I think it's I don't think. I think people in the not-for-profit sector who see it as cost shifting are probably not thinking laterally enough about this. I don't think government's saying, "Good, we'll put money into social enterprise so we don't have to put money into other things." I think they're saying, "Good, we'll put money into social enterprise," or not much in reality, but we will, in order to get more impact on the ground rather than cost shifting from employment services or whatever else it is that is going to be, the sort of impact it's going to deliver.
Yeah, absolutely. Okay, now we have a question here from David. He says that they, in his business, have just started supporting mental health through Beyond Blue and would like some information on how they can do what they're doing better and reach a larger audience.
Yeah, okay. I think that I'm just thinking laterally. I mean, I think there's a few things you can do. I mean, we've got a number of social enterprises that support people with mental health issues to get back into work. And I think so that's one of the obvious things you can do. You can help people get back into work either through the way you buy or through the way you employ directly. And obviously with mental health, it's about having the right workplace environment for the people that you're trying to benefit. So, the social enterprises are purpose-built to support people with mental health issues. So I'm thinking of about 5 or 6 off the top of my head that are very good at that. So, they expect occasionally that people with mental health issues will have breakdowns or episodes and they won't actually be able to come to work. And so they've got a whole workplace model that assumes that will happen at some point, and that they'll have staff who can come in and fill in for those people. And to prevent that from happening, they also have staff who can support people and see the signs early so that they can make sure they're getting help. Either referring back to a doctor or a psychologist or whatever it is to sort of say, "Hey, we're seeing some change in the behaviour. You might want to check the meds, or you might want to sort of be aware of that when you're having a counselling session with this person." I'm not saying that we necessarily know we can do that, that social enterprises can do that with everyone, but where it's clear and they are doing that, they're creating those interventions. I mean, if someone's about to experience homelessness, they can also sometimes help and link them back into services and a whole range of other ways of doing that. So I guess what I'm saying is some workplaces are really well suited to addressing mental health issues. Some workplaces need a lot of work to properly support people with mental health issues to get back in. And what I'm talking about here is not Mark's had a stressful 3 months and he needs help in the workplace. I think any workplace should be able to support that. This person hasn't worked for 2.5 years and they still hear voices when they do anything. Doesn't mean they can't work, just means they need a workplace that will enable them to feel like they're valued and to value them effectively so they can actually do their job properly. I would sort of say what you're talking about in terms of, I mean, I'd actually like to have a conversation with you because even now, if you want to take your sound off mute, because I mean, this is a pretty broad-reaching model. I mean, if you're working with Beyond Blue and you want to reach a larger audience, is this about starting a social enterprise potentially for your?
Yeah, I guess. Can I
just jump in? Can I actually ask David to hang on? Can you stay on the line after 1:45, and we'll actually just close this session, and then you guys can have a chat after that.
Yep, happy to.
Yep. Yeah, fantastic. Thank you.
Cool. So I'll just close this out then. So quick last question then for Mark, because I'm asking everybody for one piece of advice. So what's your big piece of advice for a small or medium business who wants to make a positive social contribution and advice for those looking to possibly set up a social enterprise?
Yeah, I actually think I don't have one piece of advice, firstly, Sarah, so I haven't I'm not so clear. But, and I know we're running out of time. I mean, I would actually say that that be clear about what you do and where the opportunities are. Okay, so when we started talking about procurement to organisations, it was kind of like, okay, that makes sense. Most of what we do is buy stuff. So that's the greatest area that if we change the way that we buy stuff, then that's going to be really impactful. If we're a big employer, then maybe that's where we can deliver the greatest impact. If we make a lot of money but don't employ anyone, what are we doing with our money to have the greatest impact that we could have? If we're an investor, what should I be investing in that can have the greatest impact? So I think it's about being clear about who you are and what you do and where you can have the greatest leverage as a result of that.
Yes, perfect. I love that. And we do keep coming back to that same point about materiality, which is basically that point of what is the area where you can have the greatest influence and impact within your business. So brilliant. So thank you so much for that. I will share links to the Social Traders website and with a note to come back in late April for when, is it going to be called Social Enterprise Finder again?
No, I don't know what it's going to be called, but it's cut 1 of our open list, and we're going to do cut 2 in about July, but you'll be able to access social enterprises right across Australia from that list. So, and also, Sarah, I sent you a link to a video. So I love videos of social enterprise. If you ever want to communicate about social enterprise or social procurement, video is the coolest tool. We've got plenty on our website, but I sent one through to Sarah because I think it'd be nice for you just to take 60 seconds to watch it.
Yes, absolutely. So I'm going to put in the chat right now the Facebook group where I will post that link. So just in case any of you haven't joined that Facebook group yet, make sure you do that and you'll be able to find that video in there. I'm going to wrap this session. David and Mark, you can stay on the line once I've stopped recording.
I will. Yeah.
And anyone else, like, I don't know how private you guys want to have that conversation. There might still be other people on the line who will be rejoining the next session at 2 o'clock. All right. Thanks, guys.
Bye, everyone.